So to practice state a little bit more, let's now implement the open and close functionality for our component. So looking at the demo here, what we want to implement now is this functionality that when we click this button here, then this part of the component disappears, and then when we click it again, then it is back. So since this is something that changes on the screen, that means that we need a new piece of state. Let's first comment out this other state that we have here so that we created for our experiment. I will not completely delete it, just to keep it as a reference here. But anyway, let's now create a new piece of state. So this is going to be called isOpen. And then again, the convention for the setter is to call it set and then the name of the state. So set isOpen. So equal use state, and by default our component should be open. Therefore we pass in value of true. So isOpen starts as true, and so that's then our default state value for the isOpen state. So that's the first part of using state. The second one is to then actually use this state variable in our code. So what do we want to achieve with this state variable? Well, whenever it is true, we want this here to show, and if it's false, we don't want this to show. And whenever it's false, we don't want this to show. So what this means is that we need conditional rendering. So let's do that. Now we cannot wrap all of this here into JavaScript mode now, but let's still try. So I selected all of it, and then I will open the curly braces to enter JavaScript mode. But this will not really work because this can only be done inside some element. So, for example, we would need a div here. And so then here, close it. However, React is still not happy. So what do we have here? Test is not defined. So that's because we just removed this piece of state here from before. So let's just comment this out and give it a save. And again, we first needed to create this div element here outside, basically to start our JSX. And so then inside that JSX is where we can enter the JavaScript mode. And we need this JavaScript mode here because now we will use our isOpen. And then as for the conditional rendering, let's simply use the AND operator. Give it a save, and that's already it. So whenever this is true, then the second part here will be returned, and when it's false, then only false will be returned. So that's just what we learned in the previous section. All right, now since this is true, nothing happens here, so this is still visible, but if we were to set it to false, then our component should disappear. Yeah, so it's gone. And therefore, what this means is that this is working. So let's set it back to true. And with this, we finish the second part of using state. And now the third part of using state is to actually update the state. So for that, we need our button here in the corner. And for that, we need to write some more JSX. So let's do that here. So button with a class name of close, and then here we can use an HTML entity of times, which will basically write an X. There we go. And now we need our event handler. So for that, let's again use the onClick prop. So to directly attach the event handler onto this element. And this time, just to show you, let me actually create a function inline here. So instead of creating a handle function out here, like these two, I will now define the function directly here. So just to show you that sometimes this is also what we do, especially when we have some very simple logic. So we need to create a new function. And now what do we want to do here? Well, we want to update the isOpen state. So set isOpen, and then again, we need to pass in the new state. So the updated state. And what should that be? Well, it should always be the opposite of the current state. So if isOpen is true, it should become false, and if it's false, it should become true. And the way we do that is by using the not operator. So again, that's just common and standard JavaScript. Okay, and this should now already work. So let's just reload here to get rid of that error. And yes, beautiful. That's working nice. So our view is updated, so it's re-rendered. And so then after that re-render, isOpen is no longer true, but it's false. Therefore, then this entire part here of JSX is no longer rendered. Right? But then when we click again, this function here is called again, which will then switch isOpen to the other state. So from false to true in this case. And so updating this piece of state will then cause React to re-render the component, this time with isOpen to true. So when React then sees this piece of code, isOpen is true, and therefore this JSX is then returned. And so with this, we update the view right here in our application. Great. Now what I want you to notice about this is that let's change the state here. So again, with this here, we change the step state, which right now is at number 2. And now if we toggle this state, so if we change the state and change it again, you see that React did indeed remember the state of the step, even though we did re-render this component multiple times in between, right? So if we set it to 3, and then again, I can open and I can close, which means that this component, so this view here, has been re-rendered 2 times, still it will remember this other piece of state. So the 3 is still here. And so that's why we say that state is like a memory of the component. It can hold this information over time, even though we render and re-render it over and over again. Great. So with this, I hope you start seeing how we can use state in different situations and for different things in practice. Now, just one small thing that we could change here, and this has nothing to do with state, is that we actually don't want to return just one element here. So we want to return basically both this part here and the button. And so this means that this is a great use case for a React fragment here. So before I do that, let's just inspect. And so indeed, we have our root, which is basically everything, so the entire app. And then in there, we have this div, which is this one. But again, let's say we don't want that. Let's say we just want to have the button and then this steps div. So let's remove this from here and from here. And so now we have, remember, a fragment. So that's like the root of this JSX element here, which will then disappear in the DOM. So if we take a look now, then we only have this button and the steps div. So again, whenever you're in a situation like this, so where you need a piece of JSX to return 2 elements, then the fragment is great for that.